Thank you again for joining us on today's presentation. This is empowering students to visually communicate with impact. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to your first presenter for today, and that is Dhruva Chandrasekhar. Welcome, Dhruva.
Thank you so much. Hey everyone, my name is Dhruva Chandrasekhar and I'm part of the higher education team here at Adobe. I'm thrilled to be joined by all of you and by our main speaker, Justin Hodgson, and by India Madsen, who is a student at York University in Canada. I'm going to actually be setting the stage for today's session by talking about why we're all here. My team at Adobe partners with institutions, faculty, and students to tackle critical challenges faced by the entire higher education space. Supporting student career readiness, increasing student engagement, boosting student enrollment, and equitable access to bridge the digital divide. These are all extremely relevant, and industry research, as well as many of you, have told us that these are top of mind and will continue to be so. Although these kind of main pillars, previous slide. Although these pillars are all woven together, today we're going to be focusing primarily on student career readiness. Namely, what does it take to equip students with workplace-ready skills? In today's rapidly shifting job market, we've heard from so many institutions that graduates are not getting hired fast enough. Or when they do, they're often underemployed or have slower career trajectories. That begs the question, if student hiring has slowed down, who is getting hired? Interviews with hiring managers, recruiters, and students themselves show that students who are able to connect the dots between domain expertise and communicating that expertise are able to stand out while searching for a job. Storytelling skills and being able to explain complex, nuanced concepts to a diverse audience is a skill gap that students often have when they enter the workforce. And students who have proactively bridged that gap will have that edge. Next slide, please. Here's a visualization of that gap, courtesy of data from the platform Lightcast, formerly Burning Glass. Quick note, creative communication skills here is a group of skills we've identified like digital communication, collaboration, creative problem solving, and all the different combinations of those terms to ensure that we're being as thorough as possible in our analysis. So this slide tells us that 48%, or roughly half of available jobs in the United States, require these skills. But only 25%, or 1 in 4 recent graduates, lists these critical skills on their resumes or job seeker profiles. 48%, 25%. That's the gap that we need to help students bridge. And this gap is actually mirrored all over the world, not just in the United States. One emergent skill, and next slide, please. One emergent skill that's quickly becoming apparent, generative AI. In a rapidly evolving landscape, AI skills are becoming a piece of that career readiness puzzle. I quote the UNESCO report commissioned to explore the dawn of AI and the future of higher education. One of the key issues for higher education institutions in the immediate future, regardless of location or resource level, is the need for leadership to be equipped to advance the responsible implementation of AI. Or as a vice provost of digital learning put it more bluntly, AI won't take your job, but people with AI skills might. To that end, Adobe has worked hard to pioneer a responsible, more ethical approach to generative AI in partnership with the Content Authenticity Initiative. This is an approach that students can use for ideation, concept visualization, and connecting with all types of audiences, not to replace critical thinking or individual work. And in today's session, we'll see a student, India, participating in an exercise utilizing generative AI. So to zoom back out a little bit, we've done research to dig deeper on this overarching theme of career readiness. And we've designed Adobe Express to help students communicate across modalities and audiences, mirroring the digital skill sets they'll need to thrive in their careers. And next slide, please. We've also conducted studies on the importance of digital credentials, which are a rising, impactful way students can signal to employers that they have this key skill set. And Adobe has actually launched a micro-credential program where students can learn via bite-sized courses with really digestible content. And this is supported by Adobe Express and Credly, and it allows students to hone critical skills like storytelling with data, generative AI, and presentation design, to just to name a few, and to showcase these skills to employers with Adobe branded micro credentials. And I actually helped launch that micro credential program. And as part of this work, I spoke to faculty, students, and prospective employers on campuses. And I'd like to leave you with one anecdote which should crystallize why we're here and to set up the rest of the session. I was speaking to a computer science professor, and she told me, my students are excellent analytical thinkers. They're curious, they build, and are eager to improve. But when it comes to actually, selling their work and communicating their knowledge and passion, they often fall short. I heard the same thing from employers I spoke to. So many of them across industries talked about how their summer interns did great work and showed so much potential during the internship. But when it came time to demonstrate that work at the end of summer intern symposium, they struggled to communicate effectively and to reach their audience. And that's the gap we're trying to bridge. One that will help us move students that much closer to their dream jobs. And it'll also help tackle those other key institutional challenges. It turns out that career-ready students are more confident and more engaged in the classroom, and institutions that produce these graduates are often able to differentiate themselves to prospective students and increase enrollment. So I hope you enjoy today's session and that you come away inspired with tangible ideas and questions for further discussion. We're always happy to chat more, share our research, preview the newest Adobe Express features, and discuss how we partner with institutions to tackle these very relevant challenges. With that, it's my pleasure to hand it off to our main speaker for today's session, Justin Hodgson.
Hello, everyone. Take a minute to get set up here. Like to share the screen. So anyways, my name is Justin Hodson, and I'm a faculty member at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. But perhaps more relevant to this conversation, I also lead the Digital Gardener Initiative, which is a system-wide attempt to integrate digital literacy, digital creativity, and digital learning into the curriculum. And when I say system-wide, that's across all 7 of IU's campuses, 2 regional centers, medical school, dental school, all that kind of stuff. So we're really dealing with a diverse faculty and thinking about how to use digital creativity to support this work and get us into the classroom in strategic ways. Can I share my screen real quick? There it goes. There we go. Sorry, I'll do this real. There we go. I always like to make sound effects as I go. So I'm assuming you all do the same as, it's like, beep. Okay. Let me share. It's an ongoing battle with me in Zoom. And Adobe asked me to come and talk about some of the things that I do in the classroom and some of the ways we help prepare our own faculty. And I thought it would be awesome to have a student kind of demo in real time some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. Reason a 4, 3, 2, 1 approach. I'm going to give you sort of 4 reasons why this stuff matters in the classroom, and not just for career readiness, but for student learning and engagement. 3 approaches to integrate it in the curriculum. Sort of 2 different challenges we might look at and demo today with using Adobe Express. And then ask you to try and do one thing on your own. And I asked India to join me. India is an intern for the journal that I run, but India's never had a class with me. So this is a real world, authentic, first time trial kind of on the go thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing what India creates as we go. That being said, Dhruva really hit on a number of key points. I assume we can all share my screen. Okay, good. And about how we're thinking about preparing students for career readiness and dealing with the gap in digital skills and preparing for a generative AI sort of like revolution, if you will. But I always like to think about where I started with digital stuff in the classroom as a digital sort of focused faculty member. I teach writing by trade, but really I teach writing with digital technologies. And what we've seen over the years is that when we bring digital creativity in the classroom or digital literacy, or we think about digital practices as a valuable part of what we do, it really does 4 core things for students, right? First and foremost, it expands students' capacities for expression. And so this allows them different ways of being able to represent their thinking and to tell their stories in new and different and more dynamic ways, and just creates an opportunity for them to be successful, right? Than a less traditional form. The second part, and this is as much for faculty creating stuff as it is for students creating stuff, is that when we start playing with digital platforms and media production and media engagement or interactive web text or whatever you want to look at, right, we fundamentally provide different ways of accessing our course content and course practices for our students. And so it's new avenues into the same kind of engagements, multiple different kinds of approaches to support multiple different kinds of learners, right? The third thing that I think resonates mostly for me as a first generation student, right, is that working in and across these different kind of mixed media, if you will, or creative media, it allows me to find an opportunity for success outside of traditional academic discourse. Now, there's nothing wrong with traditional academic discourse, but many of our students are going to go into careers where that's not, that academic kind of work is not really going to map up onto what they want to do. And so, we think about this, particularly now as a first generation student, but for like second language learners, students of color, who often sort of struggle with some of the barriers that we might associate with traditional literacy, right? And the baggage that it carries. And so when we think about equity and inclusion and engagement, finding different avenues for success is really part of the bigger model that I tend to promote on my own campuses. And the last one, and I think this is an often overlooked value, is that when we work with digital stuff, there's a kind of built-in public-facing quality, right? I can count on one hand in the last 20 years the number of times a student has had a friend read a paper before coming to class for peer review, okay? And just last semester, we did a video project, for example, and 90 some students all had somebody else look at it before they came to class to get feedback from their peers. So we're not even talking about when it's due. We're talking about just before like the first draft stuff is ready. There's a kind of built-in sort of public-facing quality to a lot of this work that the digital brings to the table. So when we think about what we're going to work through today with Express, it's creating some of those conditions, right? Expanding capacities for expression, providing new avenues to course content, providing opportunities to be successful outside of traditional modes of engagement or modes of representation, and really creating this kind of real-world public condition, public-facing kind of condition. And when we're done, I'll share the slides so you all can have everything that you're going to need today. This is created in Adobe Express webpage, in case you didn't know, but it's one of those platforms we can use to deliver course content. Okay, so when we in the Digital Gardener program, we focus on how to bring these things into the curriculum, and I always say there's basically 3 ways of thinking about situating this stuff meaningfully for students. You can do in-class activities that leverage digital creative technologies like Express. You can design instructional-based assets, or you can do create assessments, or what we more traditionally call assignments in the Western side here in the US. And most of you are probably really familiar with how to make assignments, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I know later sessions in this series are going to talk specifically about building assignments, but I thought it would be kind of fun today to work through some activities or some assets that might be a way of demonstrating some of the potential not only of Express, but of Adobe Firefly as a part of that process. So that is our goal today, right? Activities include things like in-class engagements. I do Think, Pair, Make, Share, which is our activity today. And instructional assets can range from like promotion posters, which we might create, to an about me introductions, to feedback for student projects, whatever you're thinking about creating. And I've included a number of sort of examples here. This is the Think, Pair, Make, Share activity that we're working through. Jamaica Piper, a colleague of mine at IU Indianapolis, created this wonderful guide on Wikipedia editing for Afrofuturism project. And so her and a bunch of colleagues had a bunch of students working through to edit Wikipedia pages. But the asset she created is an Adobe Express web page with this detailed step-by-step instruction. And so we're thinking about these kind of avenues as ways into the conversation. Okay, with that said, we're going to do some challenges today. We're going to work through some activities. And this is what India is going to be working on as we go. And at the end, we'll bring her on to share what she's created and see how far we've got. The first one, if you're familiar with active learning, and you may know the Think, Pair, Share activity, a very common active learning strategy for classrooms. Well, I've tweaked this recently, and we do a Think, Pair, Make, Share. And essentially what the activity does is it says, you're going to get a minute or two to write down some key takeaways, some things you're thinking about. Maybe it's a course reading, maybe it's a critical issue, there's tensions you're discussing in class, whatever the case may be. Then you're going to partner up groups of 2 or 3 and discuss what you each wrote down. Then you're going to generate a list of takeaways, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 different things. And ultimately, you're going to create an image using Express to represent or communicate one of those takeaways. And then as a class, we use the takeaways, right, as a way of facilitating discussion. So you're going to create an image, you're going to share it with me, and then I'm going to pull them up in front of the class. And I'm going to be like, Dhruva, what did you create? Or India, what did you create? And walk us through what you've made. And the first time it may take a little bit of time to get people used to it, but after the first couple of times in class, students in my classes typically can do this activity in 7 minutes, 8 minutes. It's meant to be 2 minutes of thinking, 3 to 4 minutes, or 2 minutes of ideation, 3 to 5 minutes of creation, we share. It's very quick kind of engagement. And then we sort of work through the process. And so the prompt today, and this is one thing I give to the faculty in our faculty development program, is basically, what is digital literacy, right? I talk about the term, they're there to learn about the term, but what does it mean to be digitally literate? Or they have to answer one of these kind of questions, like, why does digital literacy matter today? This may be what India decides to pick up with. Or some faculty like to address, like, what are kind of issues they're facing when bringing these things in the classroom, whether it's equitable issues, student success, student anxiety, right? Those kind of things. So we're going to work through this process and kind of identify a quick workflow. So you're going to think, we're going to pair up, even though I'm not going to pair. We're going to make an image, and then we're going to share it out. So to do that, we're going to hop over to Adobe Express. And I'm going to just go to my Adobe Express app. You can do this in Adobe Express web browser. Just go to express.adobe.com. It's a browser-based app. For purposes today, I downloaded the desktop version on Mac just because of the streaming and Zoom thing to make sure we're all fine. But it's going to look the exact same once you get into the interface, right? It's pretty straightforward approach. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an image that represents how we think about digital literacy. So I'm going to, there's lots of ways into all this stuff, right? But I'm just going to go to the plus button, and we'll just create, how about a square image, like an Instagram post, right? Instagram square post. The canvas size really isn't that important for me at the moment today, right? We're just kind of thinking through the process. So we want to, when we hop into Express, right, a couple things happen. First off, we get our canvas on the page, the thing we're going to be building content on top of. And then on the left is the menu by which we select and edit and manipulate all kinds of wonderful elements once they get on the canvas, right? So if we want to add ingredients to our project, we want to add content, we need to go left. So I'm going to start by adding an image that I think represents what is digital literacy. So I'm going to go to the media button. And here I can select photos, video, audio. We're going to stay in photos. And we can do the very traditional kind of, let's search for a photo, right? So if you've ever Googled anything, right, you might just do digital creativity. And then we can select from the images that it auto-populates. You could also upload one from your device. And later in the second half, we'll do a text image, second half. And then in the next activity, we'll do an AI generated image. But for now, we'll just pick one of these. We'll do, that one seems sort of digitally oriented, right? All right, so I have the image selected, and now if I close the media box down, right, I'm going to select the image itself, and you'll see it gives the bounding box around, so I can then resize if I want. And I'm just going to click and drag. I can, move it around as see fit. Maybe I want it to fill the whole page. I want it to fill the whole canvas. And so I can, with it selected in the image menu options, I can just click the set as page background, right? So again, I'll show you how that works. You just click anywhere you click the image, right? It's going to bring up the image panel and just scroll down to click set as page background. And it's going to automatically fit to the page, right? And you can tell it starts stacking my layers here on the right, right? So as I add more things, you're going to see them stack over here on the right, so you can manipulate them. Maybe I think digital literacy is, the future of education. So digital literacy is the future of education. That's my takeaway title. And so I'm going to click the text button because I want to add a text. And again, just like before, you can add just a text regularly. You can search for a specific kind of text effect, or you can just browse through some of these pre-existing assets and examples. And maybe I want to just do, let's see what digital looks like. We'll do digital. Yeah, we'll search for digital. We'll click this one. Okay. That's really hard to read, right? So we'll do a quick edit. I got the text on here with the text box selected. It gives me these options on the left. I can ungroup them so that they are now individually manipulable elements. You can kind of see it over here in the layers element, right? So I'm just going to put, what did I say? The double click here. The future is digital. There we go. I kind of like this digital font. And so I don't need these other pieces. So I'm just going to click them and delete them. Ooh. I deleted it accidentally, right? Students often get very anxious about this. So, and faculty more so. So what happens, you can just hit undo, Command Z, Control Z, or use the undo button and put it back. But if I want to delete something in this group, I want to make sure I have the right one selected. So there's that one, select this one, get rid of that. And now I have this text and it's all to the right, which is kind of odd. But with the text selected, I can manipulate all the text effects elements on the left. So maybe I want to change the alignment. Maybe I want to change the font color. We'll make it white so it stands out a little bit more. Okay, now you can kind of see what I'm working with here. We'll move it down to the right. Close enough for now. You get the idea. It doesn't have to be pretty today. We're just trying to create something we can talk about, right? But maybe I want to add a few other elements to it. We're going to click it, the text box. Let's do some drop shadow effects. Just do classic. Gives a little hue behind it, right? Maybe I want it to animate in, those kind of things. Or maybe I want a little transparent so that you can kind of see the image just through it. In either case, I'm done, right? I think the future is digital, and now my job is to figure out a way to communicate this back to the classroom. Like, so I'm as a student, I'm thinking, okay, now Professor Hodson's going to ask me to explain this. What is my what is my rationale? Why did I say this? Or why did our group use this as our takeaway? And what does this image do to convey that? But before I do that, as we're thinking about those ideas, I have to like be able to share it with the class, right? And so I would download this image right here, click the download button, and choose PNG, right, for the file format. I can choose a JPEG or PDF, depending on your preference and what you're trying to create. Or I could share it out as a live URL. So I could publish it to the web and then just send somebody the link, right? But for today's purposes, I'm going to download it to my computer and click download. Now, before I do that, one last thing, it's something I always forget to do, and I have a bunch of these like nondescript titles. So maybe I want to change the title. We'll call this Digital Literacy, DL, April 30. Okay. So I know it's the digital literacy activity from April 30th. And now it'll give me a chance to rename it. So now when I'm looking through my files later, right, I can find what I was looking for. But in any case, we created a background image, we added some text, very sort of straightforward stuff. We're going to click the download button so we can share with other people. I'm going to download it now that it has a title. It takes a moment. It's on my computer, right? I can go over here to the downloads and you can see it here. So now I can make this available and share it with other people. In my own class, what I typically do, as you'll see from this Express guide, is typically speaking, after I have them, when it comes to sharing, I have them upload it to a Google slide or a Teams page or Canvas, someplace where we can all access the materials very quickly. And so I can go to like Express Firefly Web, and here's the one I did earlier. And I usually ask students to do this, where they add an image and either they write down their takeaway or they do one thing they've learned, if it's a kind of engagement activity. And so we could just, go down here to this one, add my image. Where'd it go? Right. And, at that point, you're just making a Google slide. So now everybody can find it, JH2. All right. So the reason why I like this activity, and I use it in every class, right? And this is something that I tell people all the time, but it's a low stakes opportunity to have engagement in class. It improves students' visual ability to think through content and context. And more importantly, though, it's scaffolding the skills that they're going to need later for a bigger project. So if they're going to make an Adobe Express webpage, or they're going to make a podcast and I want them to create design art for their podcast, they've already learned the visual design skills, or at least the visual creation skills along the way. So it's meant to be like, easy to go checkpoints so that they kind of stack toward the end of the bigger project. And so that's sort of one approach, right? We have an activity. There's lots of different ways you can bring these things into the classroom. And that's just, again, a low stakes activity approach for getting us to our goal. The second one, and again, when we send these things out, you'll get access to this thing, Think, Pair, Make, Share, and it is essentially the exact steps I just showed you. I kind of scroll through, you can look at them real quick. And this is the reason why I'm sharing this out, is I actually have a visual guide for how to do all the steps. So, and I just send this out to students before class sometimes and be like, practice this before you come to class so that when you're in class, you're ready to go. And it, really kind of just walks them through what they're looking for, what they're doing. Although I need to update it because you've added, Express has added the grids button. So I gotta add that to my list. Okay, so activity 1 is Think, Pair, Make, Share. Activity 2 is to create some sort of course promotional poster. So we're doing asset creation, right? So on the faculty side, we might build a promo for our class. On the student side, this would be what India's working on, right? I'm going to scroll down so you can see it. We might do an About Me slide. So faculty, we're going to do a 11 by 17 poster. The students, I'm going to have them do a presentation slide that they can add to our Google slide deck so we can get to know each other. The slide uses the grid function. The poster is just another design activity, but we're going to use the generative AI function for this one. So I'm going to go back to, here's my steps here, right? We're going to, build a poster. So we're going to go back to Express. Let's go back to the home page here. And for this one, I'm going to select class projects. And you'll see that it has some preset elements for you. I know in a previous one of these episodes, Jim Babish walked through all the wonderful things in Express. So if there's more specific elements you want to look for, I'm sure the folks at Adobe will send out the link to that previous recording, or you can find it online and see Jim's sort of tour de force of all the cool things you can play with. But for today, we're just going to go to class projects because that's where most of us are going to live, and choose the poster. Or again, if you're the student, we're going to click the presentation button. Right. So click the poster. And again, you'll see it's not just weirdly shaped, right? It's a portrait sort of photo. And I'm going to start by creating an image that's going to represent my class. So again, I'm going to go to media because it's a media element, right? I'm going to go to photos and I'm going to click text to image. And you can see my canvas is a portrait, right? So I'm going to go to the portrait selection for the layout here. And this is just, generative AI fun, where you get to describe what you want the image to do. Imagine this is like the active version of a Google search, right? So a Google search is, let me put in all the cool words that are going to help me find the image I'm looking for, which we would use the same process, right? We go back to images, here we go. The same idea here, where you're describing what you're looking for, right? We're just inverting the workflow. So when you go to text to image and you go to this part, you're just describing what you're looking for, but in a more active way, trying to get it to create what you're looking for. So I teach a class on rhetoric and sports, or intro to digital rhetoric. So I might do, how about robot teaching robots in a classroom, light orange hues, old desks. Really mix our technologies. So I'm just kind of describing, right? You can, at this point, you can go through and set some of these other filters and elements if you want, but if you're just starting, I always say just tell it what you want to see come out of it and see what happens and see what the magic does, right, as you get into the engagement. And so it takes a minute to think. And it's going to produce 4 options for me to pick from. Maybe. Okay. All right, so we have, I like this one here. Okay, so I'm going to select this one. Although this teacher looks more haggard, like me, like worn out from the semester, but I'm gonna stick with this one. And again, once I have the image selected, it automatically puts it on the page so you can blow it up so you can see it a little bit better, right? So I've chosen, and maybe I want this one instead, but these robots back here don't have legs, so I'm gonna go with these guys. All right, we got the image I want, and now I'm just gonna put it on the back of the page again, and I can do that by going to the main image manipulation screen, setting pages background, and it's there, right? Again, I would go through and add a text by clicking the text button. And this one, and we'll call this one R, what is it, 210, I think it's my class. Intro to Digital Rhetoric. I want it all left aligned. I didn't choose a templated theme this time. I just went straight plain text, right? Because then I can manipulate however I see fit. So I'm actually going to make this part smaller. You can see it happen in real time if I just scroll down. There you go. Okay. And I'm going to turn the whole thing into white. So it stands out a little bit more. And drag it up to the top. And technically it's ENG-R210. I always forget the ENG part. So I got my text. It's a little hard to read. And so I can manipulate this in a couple of different ways, right? Maybe I want to add a drop shadow. Again, it's all selected, so I can go to shadow and make it, so it stands out from the page a little bit. Maybe I want to add like a border behind it, something that's a solid color behind it instead. So we'll do that instead. I can go back to this shapes page, and I can select it so it has this textual fill behind it, right? Or the color fill behind it. And so now you can kind of read the text a little bit easier. You probably see, if you've been on TikTok or LinkedIn lately, you've seen some of these effects in real time, right? People use this shape behind the text to create the depth that they want. I would still add things like, that's where my course is happening at. So it's going to be SB015, Tuesday, Thursday, 9 to 10 a.m. Sorry, 10:15 a.m. Again, I can't read it, right? So I'm going to just quickly change the text color because it's, hard to see right now. The oranges are messing with it. That's the problem. And I don't need it that big, so we're going to shrink it down. You get the basic idea, right? My design skills are in a rush today because we only got 30 minutes. So, so we'll kind of play with it. The last thing I typically do when I'm creating a promotional poster is I add a kind of catchphrase, right? Something that's going to catch their attention. So maybe like, whoa, we zoomed in. What happened there? Hold on. We'll just reload the page. Oh, didn't help at all. There went. Always when we're demoing things, right? It gets really weird. Whoa, what is going on with my machine? You guys broke me. All right, there we go. You know what? We're going to start it again. Since I'm using the desktop app, I'll find it over here. Real-time design. Where's it at? You know what? We'll just go right to the web. Express.adobe.com. And you'll see I got kicked out, right? And so if I go back to my recent activity, it'll be right here. There we go. Everything's still where it belongs. That's good. Get rid of that one. It was doing something weird there. Okay, and then we'll go to, it was my end, that wasn't your end. And we'll add a quick text like, it is not all machines and, sorry, we'll do robots. Hallucinations. There we go. So add this on this one again, just so you can see it real quick, and then we'll see what India's been working on. Okay, so maybe this is what I want. It's some sort of catchphrase. It's got a marker. A lot of times I'll also add some course descriptions and some context to the posters. I put these around the campus to try and promote my class. Though at this point, if it's got generative AI in the title or something in the description, typically it fills pretty quickly. But again, I'm done. I've created another photo, created an image. We AI the bots into place, and I can again share this poster as a URL by publishing it to web. I can even share with other people to look at or work on, but I'm going to just download it. So we have a copy here, and you can PDF it. If there's a document, you can JPEG it. If I'm going to print it, I might PDF it. But for today, we'll just go PNG since it's an image and it's thinking. There we go. I forgot to give it a title. See, I always skip that step. It's one of my ongoing battles. Right? So we've got those two functions. If you are having students do the here's some examples I made earlier, right? Tim Riggins would take my sports class. Right, if students do the About Me slide, they would use a grid function in the presentation aid as well. I kind of broke down the steps here for you if you want to see that in real time. And then also some other things you can consider for doing. You can do an About Me slide, introducing yourself for your course to students. I'm a big fan of the animate from audio, which is a function in, sorry, this one. We'll go back to the, if you're looking for it, it's just click the plus button and go to the quick actions, and it should be animate from audio, which is allows you to create animations in relatively no time. One of my colleagues, Mary Bork, had her students do this a while back. It's a stats class for nursing students, and they created these fun little, like maybe you probably won't hear, but you can get some.
It's almost flu season. Group 5 wants to study flu vaccinations at the IUK campus.
Okay, so you can kind of get the idea. You just record your voice, you choose your character, you choose your background, and go. The students did this in Mary's class they were learning statistical methods for nursing. Nursing students were in this class. They often don't like the assignment, so she spiced it up by having them create these videos explaining sampling methods concepts. And then they did these videos. They had their own like little word show. It's pretty fun stuff. But it's just part of the larger suite that is Adobe Express, and the multiple ways you can start to integrate with digital activity, digital engagement, digital creativity. you know, from multimedia essays and Express web page, animate from audio, to making videos with Express. I know Kashana Fields won the Digital Edge Award last year doing this beautiful Adobe Express video on her role as a step parent for occupational therapy class. So there's lots of different ways to think about this tool and its functionality. But that being said, we kind of gave you the quick version of all these pieces. And again, it's all going to be there. You can follow the links, you can check it out, you can email me, whatever the case may be. But I want to bring India on and see what she has created. So India, hop on. I'm gonna stop sharing
So
now. Go ahead.
yeah, sure. So I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, let me stop.
Uh, oh, wait,
There
okay.
you go. Go ahead. Try again.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. So this is the visual that I made for the first prompt about my ideas about digital literacy. So I thought about why digital literacy is important. And to me, it's because we're having like such an increasingly globalized society, and like especially with the world of work, like you really have to be able to communicate with people who might be really distant from your like sphere of just understanding and your worldview. And I think that like it's really amazing how much we can communicate, and like using visuals is such an important tool for that, and for like making connections with people, because we have like the opportunity to speak with so many different people than we would have, like for example, without the internet. And like being able to actually have a working understanding of how all of the tools that we use to communicate online really influence our communication, and also how to communicate like as eloquently as possible using them is really important. So to make this, I took like this first graphic of the world map, and then I just added these little characters of different people on top of it, just to like kind of show like this idea of globalization. And then I took an image of a student, and I used the generative AI like remove background function to take away the background of this photo. And then I just added a little bit of text to explain like my main point for this. And then for the second visual, this one, can you guys see the second visual?
No, it didn't switch the screen yet.
Oh, okay, 1 second, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Keep going. You can share it.
Okay, here it is. So this was the prompt was just to create like an about me page, and to use one of the like grid templates um on Adobe Express, and then using different like pictures to describe different things about yourself. So for this one, I used generative AI, and I just put in the prompt of like a university student typing in a library, because I would say that's probably the number one kind of work that I do. And I also am studying writing with a specialization in journalism. So I put newspapers, and then this is just a picture of me. And so, yeah, that was my About Me page. And I'll stop sharing.
Perfect, perfect. So what is your, I always, you know, the thing I always start with faculty, but and students as well. What do you think, what did you learn from going through this process? I know you've played with some technology before, so this is, you're not brand new to working in all these sort of platforms, but like, what is your takeaway? Like, if you had to tell somebody who's like coming into this class, like, hey, this is what we did day one, what would you give them as like a, a pitch?
I would say like it takes a lot of um it's it takes a lot of effort to learn like how to express your ideas using a new tool. And like that in itself, I think gives you a lot of skills, because you have to be able to like first of all kind of crystallize your ideas and like the message that you want to send like in your own mind and like to yourself. Um, so you have to it's a way of like communicating that really makes you figure out exactly what you want to say, and then figure out how to say it in like a very audience oriented way that is really like tailored to like trying to convey your message in a way that, you know, other people will quickly pick up and respond to, which like just communicating through writing doesn't always do that. It's more personal, I find. So I think that it's really like preparing you for uh you know, kind of more professional communication and like communication in real life, where you're like always keeping in mind like how other people are going to interpret and like understand what you're saying, because like with images, like there's so many different connotations that like go with every image, so you really have to like think about all of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, you hit on all the things that that I typically try to stress as a teacher. It's stuff that I even stress with when I'm teaching faculty, is that by and large, most students coming into college and even as they go through college have either learned or have had a lot of exposure to try to represent their thinking in text. Okay. But they've had very little training and very little like intentional sort of support and the sort of role of visual communication as it relates to expressing that thinking or that understanding. And there, of course, there's obviously people you can pay to do graphic design and support that work. But just that shift across the intellectual part visually, right, opens up a new kind of engagement with the thinking, because it's a different kind of struggle, right? There's a great it's like Barbara Stafford has a book called Good Looking, and she talks about the need for creating imagists, or like the transition to the digital age is very visually oriented, and so we need to develop these kind of imaging skills, not linguistic skills in the same way, but like thinking about the world and representing the world equally in visuals. And tools like Express, for me, among others, right, are very low sort of hanging fruit for students to get started in this path of, okay, well, I need an icon, I need a graphic. I want them. That's not what I want. Can the machine make it? Right. And then trying to figure out how you lay it all out. The hard part is figuring how you lay it all out. Right. You didn't use a template either, I noticed. You just kind of built it from scratch. Right. And so that's the other part, is it does have templates. So students who maybe are a little more intimidated, or a little less comfortable getting started clicking all the buttons, as I always say, right, might go to the template first and kind of modify the template as a starting point for thinking that works. That's great. And you did this all while I was talking, demoing the whole thing in like, what, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So either you're really good or it's simple to do, right? One of the two, right? It's got to be one or the other. Um, it is about 1:45 in my house, so, quarter to the top of the hour. And I want to make sure we have time for questions from the audience, that if you want to ask, that India or I can answer. I know Dhruva can hop back on and provide support and answer questions in this process. But
Yeah,
we'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and see what kind of questions you have.
absolutely. We have a couple questions here. And thank you so much to both of you, India and Justin. I'm curious, one question we had was, to what extent is some of the stuff we're talking about in this session applicable to all students? Are there some kind of majors or disciplines that tend to resonate more, or is this kind of activity fit, across the board?
Yeah, it's a good question. So one of the things that, the program that I run it is for all disciplines. We all ranks, all disciplines, all campuses. It's not English specific or media school specific. There are obvious disciplines for which working in these kind of modes makes a lot of sense, but those students typically are going to be moving quickly past Express into these more professional grade tools, right? Whereas Express as a suite offers a kind of entry level point for every student, right? And so we've seen in my own program a really interest and increase in use of Express for the sciences. We've seen some cool stuff coming out of the math. We've seen obviously in English and in creative media arts departments, things like that. But psychology has been doing some fun things with try to represent their different kinds of engagements, instead of just asking the same kind of quiz questions or doing the same kind of in-class discussions and polls. They've been taking a more creative approach to student engagement as one metric. I mean, Mary's example is one of my favorites. Those nursing students absolutely loved the animate from audio thing. In fact, to the point they were asking other nursing faculty if they could teach if they could also use the animate from audio, right? So I think it's very applicable to a variety of disciplines, but I wouldn't even presume to know how that works in all disciplines, right? It's my job as a faculty lead in this case is to help support the ideas, foster a culture of innovation, and strategically think about how might it work for you in accounting. It doesn't work in all disciplines every case, at least from my point of view, but there's some way of getting started in every discipline if you have the right people trying to think through the right kinds of or specific kinds of learning engagements. And that's really the big shift for me. I don't know, Andy, you work at, well, you're going into law school, right? And so, this India, we're losing India soon. She's graduating, moving on. But so what are your thoughts on how this plays out for like things like law school in your future?
Yeah, so like I can only really speak to my own experience, but I'm a writing major right now, about to graduate, and we've used like visual design so much like over the course of my degree, which I was not expecting. Like to the degree that we used it, like I wasn't expecting that, but it's just such a big part of at least like that industry. Um, and like just understanding digital communication in general has been a huge part of my degree. And like there are always visuals that accompany writing when you publish it online these days. So it's really important, I think. Um and as for law, like I haven't started yet, but I think that I could imagine some ways that like you could probably incorporate, something like Adobe Express into like studying for law. Like I think like even just as a student, like having your own like workflow of like creating study materials for yourself, something like this to help you just memorize things, for example, like creating like visuals and having like something like generative AI to create exactly like an image of what you need, or like what you visually associate a concept with, would be like really helpful for studying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think there's an avenue for using these tools to do things besides just like turn in work, right?
Mhm.
It's a so that and that's typically how I position them, right? They are different. They're tools that support a different kind of learning engagement. To me, it's not about the output every time as much as it is about the process of the engagement and the thinking and the student's ability to communicate that thinking. My discipline, of course, lends itself to that kind of work in ways that not all disciplines do, but that's sort of the tension that we run into. I noticed there's a couple of questions here about text or visual literacy. How do you teach visual literacy? How do you scale it? Worried about students' critical literacies with that regard. And I'll sort of respond in a couple of ways. I think it's important if you are going to go down the visual road to decide to what extent is teaching visual literacy a requirement versus leveraging practices of visual literacy for other learning outcomes. And I think that's one of the tensions we run into. Obviously, in my discipline, I also teach design thinking visual literacy, right? We talk about, different modes of creating meaningful designs, and we use Express as a starting point, and we kind of move up into InDesign and Premiere Pro and whatever other kind of tools we're using. Um, so there is that, but there are ways of just leveraging basic visual engagement for learning that's not specific to visual literacy. That being said, I think you have to work in sort of systematic approaches for scaffolding these activities. So maybe start with things like basic design concepts, like contrast, repetition, proximity, those kind of things. I often have students take photos of themselves and their friends, and they remove background, and they start putting them into like a spectrum. And based on who they put where, I can kind of tell who their best friends are and who their not best friends are, right? Like we talk about that as a way of teaching proximity, right, and relationality in an image. Um, so there's all kinds of techniques. I wouldn't presume to have all the answers. I know if you get a chance, check out Curtis Newbold's the visual communication guy. He's got some brilliant resources on this. Barbara Stafford's work I mentioned earlier, James Elkin's work, Edward Tufte, just the ones that come off the top of my head, but I can put together some resources beyond that. I know, and Todd Taylor at Adobe, he has a book on using Adobe Creative Cloud in higher education. There's a really nice breakdown of some concepts and practices and tools and procedures that might be useful. I'm sure the folks here can send out that link. If not, I can add it to the Express page that I created. But so that's just it's not a definitive answer, but it's more of like, I think it's a starting point when we think about how these media work. and then what kind of quote unquote literacies would we put next to them, as a way of either what are they developing or in support of what they're developing. And if we can do it by teaching or hitting 2 or 3 different learning outcomes at the same time, fantastic. But sometimes it's less multiplistic and very more a matter of like, did you complete this activity and what did you learn, right? And that kind of flipping the model about what we grade and what we assess, sort of process. I'm looking to see if there's any questions.
One question I had, Justin, also this resonates with somebody in the Q&A. We often talk about the power of digital literacy and visual communication to take complex kind of domain specific topics, break it down, and then share it with a broad audience. And I think we've seen that it's been very relevant the past few years, especially in the public health and health communication space. And someone's asking, are you at IU, are you working with public health and health communications, or do you see an opportunity to partner with them?
Yeah, I mean, we have faculty from SPIA and the O'Neill School, both of which are sort of kind of intersect into those areas, that are in our faculty development program and are leveraging the sort of a broad spectrum of critical and creative engagements. I mean, so our faculty development program isn't only Adobe, right? It's sort of a much broader conversation about how things like Adobe Creative Cloud and Express and Firefly intersect with a larger set of goals and practices tied to enterprise licensing. So, we cover a range of tools, but it's mostly people first, pedagogy focused, and like purpose driven kind of stuff, right? That being said, we do have folks in those disciplines taking up with it, having students create infographics, public health awareness campaigns, PSAs, this kind of stuff coming out of those schools a lot. But to the extent where we're targeting them, that not so much. I mean, we have X amount of faculty each semester that take it, and we make sure we pull from a range of disciplines and a range of campuses. And so when they're in the program, they do brilliant stuff with it. Them and the other one that I've really been fascinated by lately is the folks who come from our languages department, right? Particularly in the light of like how ChatGPT, for example, can just translate everything for them, right? And create this stuff, and now really getting into some of the creative practices that students create things and then have to communicate back what they've made, or they record themselves speaking. So you're getting dialect and language sort of stuff with it. So those are two that we've seen a lot of interest from and a lot of success with. But yeah, we're not like specifically going out and saying, let's work with the health students. There's only one of me at this point, right? So, and it's system wide. There are like 9,000 instructional faculty. So it's a lot of folks at IU to play with, but.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks for that. And I think we're going through some of the different questions here. One question, and India, you can chime in here too, is any advice for students on how to pick the right skills and courses to help them in the future, and how that might align, obviously, with faculty and kind of some of the institutions represented on this session? What would you tell students on what kind of skills and courses they should look for in the vein of career readiness, and in India that might resonate with you and how you're thinking about your future career and steps you've taken to prepare too?
Personally, like, I think it's best to just take courses in what you're interested in, and I feel like that will shape your career. And that's really what I found. But I was really like, I kind of got interested in all of this just because I took a design elective. Um, and they were using like pretty more advanced like design tools. But yeah, I've taken like design, and then I took a second sort of writing and design, and how they intersect was sort of the theme of that course. So I think both of those are really like um helpful skills just in general for like career readiness. And any kind of course, I also took just a course that was kind of about professional communications. And anything like where you're creating some sort of content and you're learning how to tailor it to the needs of an audience, like whether it's visual or written, as opposed to just like courses where you are writing essays for an audience of just one professor, which is, obviously essential, but for like a lot of like career skills, I think that like this really like audience focus, like thinking about exactly who's going to be reading what you write and like how many people are going to be reading it, or viewing it. Any course that's about that sort of like content creation is really helpful.
Great. Justin, anything to add?
She hit them all. I mean, the big ones, anyways. I mean, it's we know that the market students are going to be entering is radically different and radically changing, and that we knew it was going to be different by 2030 before the pandemic and before the generative AI revolution. Like, what 2019 they said like by 2030, 85% of all jobs will be new jobs. So new jobs, new careers, new services, not like just Sarah in accounting retiring and build a new grad taking her spot. Like altogether new industries and industries that don't map neatly into disciplines. But what has always remained true, and I think you hit on it a little bit at the beginning, Driva, right, is those what are often called soft skills, but what are really the essential skills, right? Digital communication, digital creativity, digital collaboration, and digital sort of like problem solving, right? And being able to leverage platforms and practices that enable you to be successful both in person, online, remote, workflows, media, and to represent your thinking across these sort of digital landscape or digital mediascape, maybe a better way of saying that. And so, India hit all the big ones, which is like being able to do that work in a meaningful way and taking classes that allow you to thrive in those areas. In some ways will just absolutely advantage you when you hit the market. You have a better sense of design, better sense of how to represent yourself, how to communicate yourself through the documents and materials, the soft materials that promote you when you're not promoting yourself, right? Your LinkedIn page, your Instagram site, whatever the
Right.
media content you're working from. So, yeah, I think I think if we're not actively preparing students with these digital literacy skills, whatever they might be called, digital fluency, digital agility, whatever you want to call them, these competencies towards success in a digital space, then our students, we're only furthering the gap between the haves and have-nots, and we're creating advantaged students versus disadvantaged students. And that often breaks, as you know, unevenly across issues of like race, gender, and class. So it's an intentional part of how I think about DEI on my own campuses, but like really committed to driving success by preparing students with the skills they need to get where they want to go, no matter where they're going, whether they're going to start their own business or whether they're going to, work in public health.
Yeah. I've heard it described as meeting students where they are to kind of influence where they're going, to help make an impact on where they're going, right? I think we have time for one more, and I want to leave the people on the call with a tangible kind of place to start. Obviously, we'll have more content and we'll have follow-up content coming out, more great discussions for you, and more webinars. But any advice on how faculty or anybody who works with students can drive this kind of real-world application in the classroom today? Like, what is like one or a couple of things they can do right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is just to try something, try one thing, right? I always say our program is built around one thing, doing one thing, testing one thing, playing with one thing. Faculty are often anxious or nervous about bringing in technologies they don't feel comfortable with themselves. And so I say, if that's the case and you really need that comfort level, then do a personal project, create a poster for yourself, start by learning and start by doing. But ultimately, I think what is a low stakes way of perhaps starting to add some of this stuff to your class, and just try one thing with your students. I think you'd be surprised that even if you're not comfortable with how the tool works, and Express is relatively easy to use in terms of the learning curve. But even if you're not, they just try one thing. I think you'd be surprised at how much of an opportunity and engagement it will open for students, and the way they change their thinking. And not all students have computers equally, but if they have a phone, if they have a tablet, a block, they can log on the web, they can click the buttons for the most part, and make it work, or put them in groups to make them work. But yeah, just trying one thing. That's like it's so simple to think about, and I know it's sort of maybe too easy, but you got to start somewhere. I started somewhere in 2002, 2003, right? And
Right.
so I've been breaking things for 20 years, and breaking them on purpose sometimes, and less so on other times. But yeah, just trying that one thing and finding a way to kind of get started and just see how students react, because they're gonna, I think, be appreciative of the opportunity, even if it doesn't go as well as you think.
Great. And that's a great note. I know we have a minute left. Apologies. And there's a stack of questions we're working our way through. Hopefully, we'll be able to address them in the materials we send out afterwards, and in future sessions too. So thank you, everyone. And I think any last housekeeping, I know we have some polls up. Let us know how we did. And is there anything else you'd like to learn about? And any other information, if you'd like to continue the conversation, we're happy to go into more depth around some of the research we shared, some of the insights Justin and India were talking about. And then Phil, any housekeeping from your side too, or the rest of the Adobe team?